This week's episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast is proudly brought to you by Dunn's Sporting Goods. Dunn's is a family-owned and operated business with 2 locations, Peevely, Missouri and Marion, Illinois. They have over 60 years dedicated to providing the outdoorsman with the best deals on hunting and fishing gear. Be sure to check their selection at shopduns.com as well as on Facebook and Instagram at ShopDuns for weekly specials and giveaways. They've also created an exclusive discount for the listeners of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast. Use the discount code HPO to receive 10% off your purchase. Some exclusions apply. You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast, episode 104. This week on the show, we're giving a little bit of love to California as we're joined by Eric Chan, habitat conservation biologist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. All right, welcome to the 104th episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast. I'm your host, Josh Palm, and we're your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. Check out hpoutdoors.com. If you're new to the show, you can head over to iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all the great places you can find quality podcast content. You can find our show. You can also head over to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us active over there. If you're a Facebook guy, you can head over to the of our Waterfowl Podcast Listeners Group Facebook page, Facebook group. Get in there, chat with a bunch of like-minded waterfowlers, and also my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up?
Dude, I was knee-deep in a swamp this morning shooting a duck, so I am doing pretty well, my friend.
I'm just getting back from Disney today, so I'm doing a little bit better. I'm kind of worn out after the last week, but we'll get into all that good stuff in just a minute. Before we do, I want to just take a minute to thank a few of the supporters of this week's episode. First, with Native Eyewear. We choose Native Eyewear for their 99.9% polarization efficiency, injected lens technology that places the optical center of the lens in line with the natural motion of the eye, ensuring distortion-free vision and reduced eye fatigue when shooting, and their lightweight polycrystal carbonate lenses that are less likely to shatter during impact. Check out nativeeyewear.com to get yours today. Also, thank you to Lucky Duck. About the only creature that they can't deceive is you. Lucky Duck is more than a brand. It's a lifestyle built around the subtle art of critter deception. While you're focused on the business end of your shotgun or rifle, know that they're completely focused on what matters most, you. When you're in the duck blind, a dove field, on a predator stand, or chasing turkeys, they're confident that their products will help you succeed. Check out their full lineup at luckyduck.com and keep up with the latest news by following with them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, thank you to 737 Duck and Goose Calls. Original design, select grade components, superior sound, and unparalleled service. 737 takes exceptional pride in producing the finest quality, best built premium calls on the market today. They're made right here in America and offer only direct to consumers through their website. Shipping is always free in the U.S. and international orders are also now accepted online. A 20-day money-back guarantee and a lifetime warranty accompany every call purchased. 737 Duck Calls, lead the flock. And finally, Gunner Kennels, engineered for your dog, designed for your travel, and built for your peace of mind. The G1 Kennel has set a new industry standard and put Gunner Kennels in a category it's all its own. Gunner Kennels was started to protect your pet, and it continues to be at the center of everything that they do. Gunner Kennels are dedicated to building the best and safest pet travel crate on the market. Man's best friend deserves man's best kennel. Check out their G1 series of kennels and accessories at gunnerkennels.com. Also, thank you to Big Al Silhouette Decoys, Camp Chef, and Black Rifle Coffee Company. I've said it 100 times on this show, and I'll say it again. Guys, these are the companies that support our show, so please support them in any way that you can. Another way that they support you is through a few discount codes. You can head over to the HP Outdoors website, check out the discount codes tab, and you can find out how to save 10% off with Dunn's Sporting Goods, 15% off with Black Rifle Coffee Company, 10% off with White Rock Decoys, 15% off with 737 Duck Calls, 15% off with Alpha Dog Nutrition, 10% off with Gunner Kennels, and 10% off of the Ridge Wallet. So thank you to the supporters of our show. And this week we got a good one, Dan. This one's weird for me, though. I have to be honest with you, because over the last week I've been on vacation in Disney with my family. so I wasn't available to participate in this interview, and I still haven't listened to it. As a matter of fact, I just got back this morning, came home, went right to my son's soccer game, came home, watched Penn State lose to Michigan State, freaking annoying. And now we're doing this. So yeah, haven't had a lot of time to catch up. So I'm going to rely on you to tell me kind of what's going on.
Yeah, Eric has been a member of our listeners group for a while, and he's really quick to chime in on anything concerning habitat, and especially guys that are, trying to plant around a little water hole they have or something like that. And he has a lot of good info. He does it for a living. A little personal connection that people don't know. I was born in Whittier, California, that we talk about. His parents actually grew up there, and that's where I was born. So pretty neat. The dude has traveled a lot. He goes on a lot of trips, and 7 hours. It's funny because when you think of California, he's going on 700-mile trips in state. And I'm like, man, from our northern border to our southern border is 200 miles, and he's making 700-mile trips from SoCal up to the northern border to hunt, opening days and whatnot. And, just a really good chat. And it kind of is a total overview of California and what you can expect out there. And I would like to get out there and shoot a lot of pintails and cinnamon teal.
Yeah. And this episode's cool in the sense that, some of the feedback that we've got is, people want to hear us talk about other places around the country. And, we got a lot of listeners in California and Washington and the West Coast. And, neither one of us have hunted out there really. So we don't have a lot of familiarity out there. So to be able to get Eric on and to shed some light, is really cool and exciting to hear, just about different things and the ways that different people hunt and what they can expect when they get out there. So, that's cool. And hopefully, as we continue to go here, we'll be able to, get out and experience some things for ourselves and be able to talk about, different areas of the country and stuff like that. But, until then, it's awesome that we can, reach out through the group and, through the people that listen to the show and make connections and then be able to, have good conversation, bring good content that we can't, personally speak to. So, I have to assume that this was probably as much of a learning conversation for you as it'll be a learning, chat for others to listen to.
It sure was. And, I kind of mentioned that I went out and visited a friend, who's one of my longtime friends. Jamie Gregg lived out there. He's back home now, but, Bakersfield, you drive through and there's mountains and we're going out to wineries and stuff, but, you have all kinds of like crop fields in between the mountain ranges. And I didn't see a lot of birds when I was out there, but just talking to him, that they fly all through these valleys all the time. And another thing was the lottery type system that they have for their blinds and on these refuges is, you pay a daily fee to get entered into it, and some people can't make that day, so you have to go in person the night before for random drawings for the following day. But if everyone shows up, you have no chance at all. So there's a lot of extra steps that you have to go through. And then the whole, kind of ammo fiasco we get into as well, and the way that they're getting around that. So a lot of good stuff. And, I think people will enjoy this. It was definitely an eye-opener for anyone that wants to hunt California. A lot of birds and a lot of things that you need to look out for.
Cool. So why don't we go ahead and roll that? I know you guys spent a pretty good chunk of time talking, so let's not drag out any longer and go ahead and welcome Eric to the show.
All right, and tonight I am talking with Eric Chan. He is out in California. He is a habitat conservation biologist for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Eric, how are you doing, and how's the weather out there?
Hey, Dan, what's going on? Weather is good. I think the high tonight is low 60s, so real chilly out here. And no, I'm still running around in shorts all day long. And but no, I'm stoked to be on the show, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I talked to you a while ago and wanted to get you on, and it's funny because, you're in our group, and there's a lot of times that people ask, what are you planting here? What are you planting there? And you always had a really good a really good answer for people. So I was like, you know what? I think give that guy a shot, bring him on the show, and see what he does out there. And you know, a lot of people probably don't know it, but I was born in Whittier, California,
Wow.
which is just, you know, southeast of Los Angeles. And we moved back here to Pennsylvania when I was about 2. So a lot of people don't know I'm a California baby.
You are, yeah, you're local.
Yeah.
That's actually where my parents grew up. So that's really funny.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents talk about it a lot, and you know, they still have a lot of friends out there. They talk to them all the time, and they both grew up, my mom and dad, in Pittsburgh, and then once they hit 18, 19, they headed out there and set up shop for a little bit, and then I guess the roots were calling a little bit, and they wanted to come home. So so now we're here in PA, and I think the hunting out there is better. The laws are probably pretty similar, and you know, you shake your head a little bit, but you know, let's talk a little bit, you know, what's your background, where'd you grow up at, kind of how you got into hunting, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Like you mentioned, I'm a habitat conservation biologist with the state fish and game agency over here. We used to be called Fish and Game, and then through some political movements, we're now the Department of Fish and Wildlife. My background, I grew up completely in SoCal. Grew up here in the SoCal area. Parents are actually immigrants from Thailand and Laos, and so getting into hunting is kind of a funny story. People always ask, you know, how'd you get into hunting? But if you talk to my dad, his families are actually rice farmers back in Southeast Asia, and so hunting was kind of in their culture, is one of the things they enjoyed doing, but also just a way for them to gather meat. So when they came over to America, when I think he was a teenager in high school, he wanted to keep hunting, and I remember talking to some of his buddies. The first time they ever met my dad, they see him out in a marsh wearing blue Levi's and white t-shirt trying to shoot ducks. And he eventually figured it out that you needed waders and that you can't just walk around, you know, dressed like that trying to bag a mallard. And man, he just got me hooked on hunting growing up. I just remember as a kid, you know, my dad coming home with the strap of ducks and just being super interested in what dad was up to, and watching hunting TV shows on TNT. I think that was the network back then that used to show, or TNN, I think what it was, that used to show some hunting shows. And he took me out when I was, like 6 or 7, on my first hunt. And I think it's one of those deals that's just like etched in my mind. I remember sitting in the dark, not knowing what's going on, and just hearing this. I thought there were fighter jets coming over, and I looked up, and it's a small flock of green-winged teal buzzing over us. And my dad took a shot, and he told me to walk out there and grab it, and I've been hooked ever since.
Oh man, that's a great story. And it's funny because I put up a poll in our Facebook listeners group, and you know, who got you in hunting, and I think a friend won out, and then the dad was right behind it. So that's awesome, and pretty funny that he was out there in blue jeans and a white shirt and trying to get it done. So that's pretty.
His buddies didn't live him down. They don't live that down. It's been like, you know, 30, 40 years, and they still tell that story.
So did your upbringing kind of get you into your career path? Is that how you kind of wanted to get into that? And you did your studying in Hawaii, is that correct?
That is true. Not your typical school for getting into waterfowl work or whatnot, but you know, growing up, being so interested in being outside, that's just where I wanted to be. After that, I mean, it was pretty much all ducks. After that point, I just wanted to play sports and hunt ducks. I remember, to the point of like, I don't know if you know the old video that the documentary used to put out called Art of Commanding Ducks, but I'd sit and watch that all day long as a kid. And then you look at my old science projects, and they were always about waterfowl or wetlands, and it wasn't like a goal going into college, and that's what I ended up doing, but just the way your interests kind of guide where'd you end up, it totally was a huge influence on what I do today. And when I was sitting there as a senior, or I guess as a freshman in college, it's just thinking like, what do I want to do with life? What do I want to end up working in? And I just wanted to be excited to go to work every day. I wanted to do something that mattered. And growing up here in SoCal, where we've seen so much urban sprawl in the last few decades, it's just a huge passion of mine to get into the field of habitat conservation, and tying it in with hunting was just like the best thing I could imagine. So for sure.
Man, that's incredible. So how did you choose Hawaii? Was it more, because I know you're into surfing, so is it more for surfing and hanging out, or
yeah.
what made you choose there?
No, that's funny. So Hawaii, yeah, it's coming. The two things I wanted to do when I was in high school was one was like fish crappie and hunt ducks, and then I picked the school where you couldn't do that. The one state in the whole country that you couldn't do any of those things. Maybe Alaska, you can't catch crappie, but no, I ended up in Hawaii mostly because of scholarships, and so it was just the place that I could afford to go, and it was easy on the parents, and so I ended up over there. And to be honest, no duck hunting. They stopped hunting ducks up there after World War II is when they reassessed their waterfowl hunting program, and just it's been X'd ever since. But I went out to Hawaii, got into natural resource and environmental management, studied that, and that actually was a great program. It's an interesting culture out there where, just in general, people just care about the environment. I mean, I wouldn't say they care about it more, but it's just part of their culture to kind of look around, and they're so in tune with things, with issues, and so just kind of being able to study in that environment with such natural beauty all around was a blast. And yeah, surfing was something that was an influence too, and probably skipped a few classes, probably a little bit too many classes. I know guys in the South, show up to class in their waders or whatever, or bust down and hit the ducks when it's cold front. But I think I missed class sometimes when there was a big south swell, big north swell, and so.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I can imagine the field work would be pretty cool. Doing all the hiking and really taking in all that Hawaii has to show there. But you're saying that they probably care more, and I bet they do, because if you're in Missouri or Kansas or somewhere, you can kind of spread out if something bad happens. But if you're in Hawaii, sure, you're on an island, and that's your livelihood. That's what you got. So I'm sure that they want to definitely take the steps to cover everything. And that's, I was thinking before, is there a lot of waterfowl in Hawaii and they just don't hunt them, or is that just? Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned that. And so native waterfowl to Hawaii, you have the nene goose, which is, I think that's a well-known bird that folks kind of think of Hawaii when they head over there. And there's also a Hawaiian duck and a couple other, I think there's a teal species as well. From what I understand, they reassessed the resource after World War II and just decided that, with hybridization with the mallard duck and the Hawaiian duck, it was just, they were at a point where they're, with for example, with black ducks, they just couldn't delineate or figure out a way that they could manage that resource and safely not impact Hawaiian duck populations, and so, but in terms of waterfowl, you'd be surprised. It's funny you mention this stuff, because my freshman year, I remember walking from my dorm down to the CAP for dinner, and obviously I couldn't hunt ducks until I came home for winter break, and I just walking. I was probably on my phone looking at some forum, reading the duck report, whatever, and I hear this sprig call, and I thought I was like hearing something, and I'm like, what is that? And I look up, and then sure enough, there's a bow sprig locked up. I'm kind of tripping out. I'm like pointing out. My friends are like, "What's this guy looking at?" And there's a bow sprig locked up and lands in a Japanese tea garden in the middle of campus. And I'm just like, "What is that guy doing here?" And I'm like, what is going on? Like, we're in the middle of the ocean. Like, how did this guy end up here? I did some research after that, and come to find out, historically there have been pintail that annually come down to Hawaii to winter. Speckled-bellied geese. They've seen snow geese. Nene geese are just really like a population of Canada geese that were isolated, and And so there are birds around, and they get there. There's a native Hawaiian coot. You're not going to see grinds of birds, circling, but there are on Oahu on the North Shore. There's a couple of shrimp farms, and you go over there in the wintertime, and you see some sprig, you see some. I think you've seen a couple widgeon out there sometimes, but definitely nice. It definitely was nice coming back in the wintertime and seeing waterfowl all over the place again. So
that has to be pretty. How far is that flight in a plane?
Yeah. So heading there, you have a little bit of sometimes a head or a tailwind depending on the weather, but it's typically 5 to 6 hours. So.
And that's traveling a few hundred miles an hour. So that's a good little trip for any bird to make it. Man, that's cool.
But most of those birds that hit Hawaii, they're actually coming out of Alaska. Okay. Interesting enough, yeah. So I guess you look at that Aleutian band, and that's kind of where they've banded sprig out of, is from that area, and they've recovered bands from Kauai in California. So the sprig are kind of coming back up and then heading down the Pacific Flyway, doing something different. And folks have shot birds down there and turned in bands. Like it says it's banded in Hawaii. I think something's wrong with the system, but a biologist check in the USGS system says, yeah, banded in Kauai. So
wow. So they do band and they do band them down there. Did you get into that at all or know of that?
I didn't. A lot of the banding efforts, I think that was going on at that time was on Kauai, and University of Hawaii, which is where I went. The campus I was on Oahu, which is the capital island. So,
gotcha.
Field work, I did a lot of like native plant stuff, and just general resource planning and some marine work, obviously with the ocean just being right there, So,
man, that's super cool. So I have to ask, just because, but did you ever see any great whites while you were surfing?
Oh, over there?
Yeah.
No. Lucky enough, because with the sheer number of folks that get in the water up there, I think it just it increases shark encounters, and every so often you hear someone going out in the water when it's murky. That's like just the worst time to be in the water, and then like they get bit by a tiger shark. And so most of the shark encounters out there with tiger sharks or blacktip reef sharks near shore. There are great whites that head out to the Hawaiian Island chains, but they typically stay deep. Gotcha. And I'm not sure what they're foraging on. But in California, where I surf, down in southern Orange County, there's a spot where I see juvenile great whites. I mean, every other time I go out. Oh. So you kind of just, when you see that dorsal pop up, you kind of just float into the middle of the pack, and then just try not to be out there at sunset. But that happens. Just a few weeks ago, lobster season opened up, and a young man got bit. I think a great white got him in the shoulder, and so that was a bummer to hear. And he's just right. I think he was in northern San Diego County. So,
yikes.
Yeah, but you're in their house, So it's kind of like guys who hunt up in Alaska, like with those grizzlies. I think I saw on a post today that some duck hunter in the HP group, ran into a grizzly.
They're waiting for a shooting light and got fake charged by a grizzly, and it stood there and stared at them.
Yeah, that's not something we have to worry about.
And then they stayed and shot a few ducks each. Ugh.
That's just, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I'd be. Well, if you grow up and you're used to it, like you said, you know how to handle it. So
yeah, that's a good point.
It's definitely. I'm glad I don't have to deal with it on a regular basis. How about that?
Yeah.
All right, man. So before we get into hunting and how great of a place California is, let's talk about kind of what are your job responsibilities. Take us through a day in your life, and how it kind of goes towards waterfowl.
Yeah. So, you're right. My title is a habitat conservation biologist / environmental scientist. My focus and the programs I work in are in wetlands conservation. California's lost 91% of our wetlands, and so it's a major concern for the state, for the resource agencies here to conserve wetlands. And so what I get to work in is anything from lakes to streams to marshes, and everything in between. And so I guess to take you through a regular day, I spend about probably 75% of my time in the office, reviewing permits, biological studies, proposed projects in wetlands, and then about 25% of my time I get to spend in the field. And while I always try my best to loop in waterfowl conservation and habitat improvements, sometimes, down here, especially being down in Southern California, most of our state waterfowl biologists that spend the bulk of their time on those things are up in the Sacramento Valley. And so when I get to comment on a waterfowl project or waterfowl habitat, it comes ever so often. The way that our state agency is broken up, we have Habitat Conservation Group, we have law enforcement, and we have our lands management group. And it's really the folks that work in lands management that manage our state wildlife areas. I get to work with those folks, talk about plantings, improvements to improve water delivery. Those are the kind of projects that, I guess, in terms of waterfowl relations or being related to waterfowl, that I get to work on. But a whole nother side of my program is just working with, endangered species, endangered birds, fish, plants. And so it's kind of just the state's effort to position biologists to work and to prevent net loss of wetlands in our areas. And so in Southern California, we don't have a whole ton of amazing wetland habitat anymore. We in the regions that I cover, we have a lot of estuaries. I'm kind of coastal, a lot of ephemeral streams and areas that used to at one point had steelhead salmon, and now, I mean, we might hear reports of like one coming up, and that's all because of just dams and like just not passable fish structures and obstructions in the waterway. And so it's a broad array of things that I look over, but the ones that always get me excited are when it's in the habitat where I get to see ducks and improve conditions inside the Pacific Flyway. And so
permit denied. We're keeping this one out here, right?
Yeah.
So 91% loss of wetlands, is that a lot of farming, or is it, you kind of mentioned the urban sprawl, right? Is that like buildings or what, where are they going to?
Yeah. So, essentially the Central Valley at one point was just this big drainage for the Sierras, and on both sides there are actually, I guess you could say there were lakes on both sides of that mountain range, all the way up and down north to south. And so a lot of that was converted to ag land. California has a whole ton of ag. I mean, if you've ever driven up the 5 from Southern California to NorCal or vice versa, you'll see that just like most of our state is just ag. Like there's tons of orchards, farms, rice paddies in the north. I mean, there's a lot of alfalfa now. And so a lot of that land was converted. And there's actually an area you can go out to in the Central Valley where you've seen the ground drop in elevation due to groundwater loss. And so people have placed markers from decades, and you can see like 1928, it's like 20 feet up or something like that. And so, wow. Ag conversion so there's been loss of water from that, wetlands due to agriculture, but also, due to urbanization, we've redirected water, to feed our rather large population. We have a huge population in the state. LA gets a whole lot of water brought in from Northern California. I mean, hundreds of miles of canals and pipes and networks to get water here. We get water from the Colorado River that comes from the east. And so those water diversions, ag land and just urban sprawl have all contributed to wetlands loss.
Yeah, my buddy lived out there, and he actually just moved back to PA, but I forget the name of the company, but they farm a lot of carrots and do a lot of the juice and stuff like that. I think it was up like Tehachapi, somewhere up there.
Yeah, just north of LA area.
Yeah, so but driving up through there, and you just see all these fields and a lot of, the turf and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely different than what I thought California would look like. And amazingly enough, I think, when did we go out? I think it was maybe like March or April. And I didn't see we saw a lot of mule deer.
A lot of mule deer, cool.
Yeah. So crazy enough, but not too many ducks. So
yeah.
What's the other big town up there?
Is it Bakersfield?
Bakersfield, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
they do have some birds up there. There's a National Wildlife Refuge that holds quite a ton of pintail. I mean, if there's a place I could tell you to go shoot a pintail in Southern California, that'd be one of them.
Man, I should have ventured around more. I think we drove out to the coast and dipped into the Pacific for a minute. I mean, it was freezing cold. Outside too, but the water was on top of it. So I was just like, my feet in the Pacific was good enough, that I can actually remember instead of when I was 2. But no, yeah, it was a good trip. So, fun stuff. And definitely we hit some wineries out there, and just a beautiful place, beautiful. So, well, that's all good stuff, man. So let's get into hunting a little bit. I guess I just have a few questions here. Let's kind of the amount of birds, because I remember seeing a report a while ago, like mallard harvest, stuff like that, pintail harvest, and California is always a surprising state. And it seems like, a lot of people are hush-hush about California and how good the hunting can actually be. So maybe tell us about, tell us a normal hunt that you go on. I think I just saw that you just got done with a hunt, but you put some miles on the vehicle to go there, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I guess we can start with that. We just opened, our state just opened for our general waterfowl season on October 6th, so last Saturday. And so we did a 730-mile one-way trip up to the Oregon-California border in the northeast corner of our state. And we got into some speckle bellies and some pretty big honkers. My fiance shot her first speckle belly for her first honker, and she's been spoiled because of a few of the hunts that she's been on. I think her first ever hunt we got 3 banded greenheads. Oh. And then her first goose hunt, she slams honkers and specks. And so I think her standards are pretty high when she goes out there nowadays.
She's your lucky ticket right there.
She is, yeah, no doubt. But that was a journey, and it was our first time heading up that way. We hunted actually. I guess I can burn the spot. It's called Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge. It's actually the first waterfowl designated refuge in the country.
Really?
And so, yeah, interesting histories up in that place. But they've also dealt with a lot of water issues over the last few years. And so they opened up a couple weeks earlier, kind of like how some other states will, the north areas will open up a couple weeks out earlier than the southern sections. But it's a neat area, just a whole landscape change. It's almost like a high country desert / basin, and so you just have sage scrub, and you can see the pines kind of like towering over the hills up there. But there's a lot of wheat, and there was at one point more water, but there's still a lot of water up there, and just almost every cell you check, there's just a couple thousand birds as you're driving around. And it was different especially for us SoCal guys who don't get into a whole ton of geese like in that number, and so just to get into a hunt like that was a treat for us. And so but to summarize the state, we are a neat state, and you're right, people are kind of quiet, and at the same time it's also a surprise. I think with California, that when you think of it, people just automatically think about Hollywood, about Disneyland, think about San Francisco. Hunting isn't the first thing that typically comes to mind, and even for the residents here, I mean, we are, compared to the population, we're a tiny percentage. I think and in looking at licensed sales, it looks like the trend is trending downward here, like it is across the country, unfortunately. But for the folks that do hunt, and they're like privileged and just like blessed and lucky enough to be able to see the resources that our state has to offer. I mean, there's a ton of good hunting, almost in every regard. Just good big games and monster mule deer, a great waterfowl like we were talking about, just turkeys, the upland game. In terms of waterfowl, for the average Joe that hunts public, we have 40 or so state/federal managed areas for waterfowl, from up and down the state. I think down here in SoCal we have like 2/3, depending on when you draw the line. But those areas are areas funded by duck stamp dollars, funded by license and sales, Pittman Robertson tax monies, and so that's all put into planting and kind of like managing these areas for waterfowl during wintertime. They're usually dry. For most of them are dry through the spring and summer with a little bit of water for brooding. But once come wintertime and autumn, they get flooded up pretty good. And those areas are interesting. To break it down for you, to hunt these public areas that I'm describing, these managed areas, you have to put in there's two ways to get on. So there's a reservation system. I don't know if any other states do this, but we have a waterfowl reservation system that you log in onto our state website, state fish and game website, and you pay $1.34 17 days out to the refuge that you want to hunt. And what you're doing is you're throwing like a lotto ticket into this internet, cyber raffle, right?
Right.
And 14 days out, you either get an email saying you were selected for a reservation, or if you don't get anything, then you just weren't. What that guarantees you is a spot on these refuges in the morning, and they have different quotas. Some have as little as 20, some have 200, some have 150. And so like they manage the amount of folks who are coming in because there is a high demand. We don't have our percentage of hunters is low, but we still have a ton of hunters here just based on us being a big state.
Right.
And so it's tough because, it's tough for hunter recruitment because there's like all these steps to hunt onto a public refuge. You got to put in a couple weeks out. You can put in a season-long app, at the start of the season, and it just automatically inputs on those days. But our hunt days typically on these places are either Wednesdays, Saturdays, and some places let you hunt Sundays. And so you have a number that you generate if you win a reservation, if you're selected, and that's kind of like your place in line to show up to the check station typically at 3 a.m. in the morning is when these check stations open. You kind of hop in line with your lotto card. They also have like a sheet to check your hunting license number, and you pretty much go through this process of you walk up to a window, show your license, show your reservation, and then there's a board. And if staff are helpful, they might help you pick a spot to hunt. But at some places, just like pick a blind, pick an area. And these areas are usually you usually have two options. You usually have a assigned blind where you typically have to hunt, for example, like within 100 yards of a stake or a pit blind, right?
Okay.
And then you have like free roam units where you can kind of you just kind of they have a limited quota for this cell, and they might let like 10 parties in, and you go in there, and it's kind of just you just have access to this free roam area hunting in the toolies. And so that's how that reservation process works. Now, obviously, most folks, a certain percentage doesn't show up each morning, so there's usually open slots left on that refuge, and so that's where you have the SWAT line come in, or what some folks call a lotto. And just to get into that, you have to show up the evening before, usually between 6 and 8 p.m. is when that's open. You got to be there to physically submit your license number and your draw card into a lottery, and they'll pick numbers there for the next morning's hunt. And so you can kind of see where like this is getting tough for folks who family guys, like they can't just bounce out of town on a Friday evening to go throw in for a lotto and
right
and jump onto a refuge in the morning. I mean, guys do it, no doubt. There's some committed waterfowlers in the state, but it's tough for hunter recruitment in that sense, where just to get on in the morning, you have to jump through all these hoops, to hunt a public refuge. And these areas are pretty good. I mean, I think we averaged I have a note here. I think we shot Out of all the refuges combined, in the last season, I think they averaged 2.12 ducks and geese per person.
Okay.
So it's not bad. But for all of that, you could still put into that lotto and not get in, and then you're just out of luck. You either gotta go home or you hop in your truck or your RV and you just take a nap. And once people start leaving the units in the morning or in the afternoon, you can kind of refill their blinds or their areas. And so that's kind of a picture of our public refuge hunting system. And so most of those areas are concentrated in the Central Valley. The three down here, for example, there's one down here that has about 50 blinds, and on opening day there's just like 300 folks that line up on that door. And to be honest, like I think most folks get on, but it's a stretch. They might get on like for like a couple hours to shoot in the evening, and that's it.
That's
so
interesting, man.
It's a different game. It's not like, and we do have what are called, those are usually type A areas are like that. It's just a designation to the state managed wetlands, but we have type B and type C areas, public lands where you can do your own deal, hunt every day of the week, public waters that you can hunt with a boat. So there are other options for sure. We do have a lot of public land. It's just how willing are you to, it's up to the hunter to be, I guess, willing to go out and like explore those areas, because you're only going to be successful on those type of areas when you do your scouting, when you're familiar with what areas of birds you're using. And so there are other options down here in Southern California. There's a whole lot less, but there are areas that you can go and hunt 7 days a week and get into some decent birds. But I also in the same point, I know folks who leave LA at on a Thursday or Friday morning just to get up to the Sacramento Valley every single weekend just to hunt ducks and geese. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's surprising. You're like, there's folks like that in California. I'm like, yeah, there are. Like, you'd be surprised. There's some darn good duck hunters out here. So it's an interesting state. Yeah.
So I'm just going back to that draw system and the people that don't get drawn, but they show up the night before, and that's only pretty much if people don't show up in the morning. So if you have to show up 6 to 8 p.m. and you could not even have a shot. That's just a shot in the dark. Yeah, that's crazy.
In theory, if everyone showed up, like, your draw does not matter.
Right.
You'd still get a number, and you just be like the first in line to refill a spot.
Right.
But then you get into a game where it's like, it's like I really call it combat hunting, because you're like, it's competitive. Like, you're trying to trick guys who are in front of you in line to take a spot that's not so great. You kind of talk that spot up, and then they jump on it, and like that spot doesn't shoot jack in the afternoon. And then it's just interesting. Like, it's a different style of it feels competitive, and you can get into a free roam unit, and I guess it's like any other public piece of land where there's nothing stopping the guy from like seeing your decoys, walking 40 yards downwind and just shooting your swing.
Right.
It's just tough, and it's a different ball game. But for the folks who stick it out on public, I have buddies that hunt just almost predominantly public, and they if you saw their piles, you'd be just shocked at how well they do.
They just crush
it. And so they crush it, and it all comes down to your ability to put in the work and the equity, the sweat equity to find a spot, scout the refuge out for food, and in the summertime when it's dry, and just kind of get away from the crowd a little bit, do something different that the birds haven't seen.
So when it is hunting season, and say, I guess I just have more questions about the whole draw system.
Yeah, go for it.
So is that like a daily, or like you said, it might be Thursday, Saturday, Sunday? Is it a daily $1.34, whatever the charge is, like that you have to pay?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, to get into that. So just for the reservation, it's $1.34 just to put in for the lottery.
Per day, or for
every hunt day that you want to put in. That's that's the reservation system. For, playing the lotto at these refuges, that's free.
Okay.
But to get on, that's where it gets kind of pricey. Like, our hunting licenses are pretty pricey. I think after it was all said and done, my license is like 186 or something this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not including day passes, which is what you need to hunt these areas. And so I think I think this year it's like, I don't know, between $20 and $23. I got to check, but just for a day pass to get on. So say you draw reservation number 1, you show up, they're going to, hey, let me see your reservation. Thanks. Where's your day pass? Then you got to submit your day pass, which is about 20 or so bucks. And so you got to pay to play on these places, and you can get a season pass, which is pricey, but I think if you hunt like 10 times, it pays for itself,
Right. Yeah.
And so for me though, it's like, because knowing that it goes into conservation work and managing these areas, I'm okay fronting that cost,
right?
Like I love folks who birdwatch. I don't have an issue with them, but like, I'm proud that hunters fund conservation in our state, and so it just gives you that, I don't know, kind of like that weight. And when it gets into conversations about management decisions and stuff, that, hunting is an important part of these areas. And so it's pricey, but it's just, I guess when you're used to it, it's just the norm, right?
Just the way it is.
Yeah.
Like at least you get Sunday hunting. So
it's a good point. Yeah.
Here in PA, we still don't have it. So
yeah, that's a good point.
So if you do get drawn, do you get an opportunity to scout those areas at all? Like, could you go out Wednesday? Like if you you can hunt Thursday or possibly Thursday, can you go out Wednesday and scout those areas, or are they like off limits?
It's on it's typically a refuge by refuge policy basis, okay. Right? And so some areas, well, for example, like you mentioned Wednesday, I wouldn't be able to scout Wednesday because that's a hunt day, and you can't be on certain areas of a refuge during a hunt day if you don't have a draw, But like a lot of these places, there's nothing stopping you from driving certain roads on Thursday or Friday evening or what, just to get an idea of what areas these birds are using, and that does it makes a difference. I think it's funny though, because like anywhere you see birds sitting somewhere on a non-shoot day, and then you get there on a hunt day and then they're just somewhere else, Right. All these areas that I'm talking about typically have closed zones, and you'll see snow geese that get educated in December or January, and they'll come up in the stratosphere and then just vertically drop into the closed zone. they learn to fly around.
Yeah.
They know. Yeah, they learn to fly their flight paths around hunt areas, and you'll lift off in the morning and you see them go straight up and then go straight that way to feed and come back to the water and just drop straight down. So it's funny. But the one thing I've learned though is that typically areas that shoot decent, they kind of shoot decent the next year and the next year after that,
Yeah.
And so once you learn an area, you kind of have an idea of like what's going on. Sometimes things change with like, they might clear some willows and all of a sudden the birds don't like it. But on most seasons, like once you figure it out, you kind of know what blinds a shooter and what's not,
Yeah. And that's, I was going to say, we have a refuge here at Pymatuning State Park, and just holds a ton of geese, and they farm it, so it's like cornfields and
nice.
And but they have blinds set up, and my buddy lives across a road from one of these big fields, and it's super long, it's flat, and he can watch all these birds. Well, he just watches them and just laughs because there's just maybe say like 1,000 birds using it one day, and they just weave in and out and around these blinds. They know exactly where to go. They're just and like you were saying, they drop straight down. They know. Or if you can only hunt till noon, then they start flying at 12:01, whatever the case.
Exactly.
They're definitely conditioned to it. So
a couple of these areas they stop at like, I don't know, like 3 p.m. or whatever, and you just see them like come out of nowhere. Yep. Just all of a sudden they're just there. You've been sitting there all afternoon and nothing. And so it's interesting. Yeah. A lot of these folks, there are also a lot of folks like just like their bread and butter is just pass shooting ducks in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just fine. Like, I mean, they get into them. Like, right. A lot of these guys will just hunt the first 2-3 hours. And I mean, sometimes there's just that many birds around that you get away with. Not even, I've seen folks not even put decoys out, just kind of get into a tule patch and pass shoot birds. And not my cup of tea, but I mean, hey, you're a hunter, and I'm all for more hunters, and so it's different, you know.
I know what you're talking about. we hunt one place that, I mean, we struggle to get away from the road on the side and the railroad tracks, and then people will go and stand on the tracks. Well, you know, we're sweating getting out in the middle of this, and then, you know, they're shooting better than we are, and, you know, birds falling wherever, and what it is what it is, but, you know, it's part of it. So I'm thinking about my trip out there and all the driving we did, and there was a ton of sod farmers, and I'm just thinking, you know, if there's geese that are flying down through there or something, are these companies allowing people to hunt geese on these farms, or is it kind of like they have dogs chase them off, or is there?
No, yeah. So I guess one thing you haven't talked about is the private land opportunities out here too. You know, there are a ton of clubs, a lot of duck clubs in the Sac Valley down here too. Different style clubs, natural vegetation. We have a lot of rice fields. There's a lot of rice clubs that hunt checks and whatnot. Clubs on rivers, clubs that hunt estuaries, and so there are some really good private land options. I mean, there's certain clubs here that the guides just don't. They just settle for all green. You know, like they won't have their folks shoot anything but mallards, right? Right. So there's definitely some stuff. But in your question to the sod fields, it just depends on the area. In those areas, if you're talking about the southern kind of rim of the valley, you do see birds on them, and depending on the area, these guys are okay with folks coming out to shoot honkers or sometimes snows off of them, you know. Right. But I think what it is, it's like there's so many folks here. You hear, and people have, and I hear this is what happens kind of across the country, but folks have just kind of lost that trust for strangers, you know. Right. So if you're like a local person, you're talking to the farmer, you build that trust up. Yeah, like there's some folks that have some great private land options, but it's tough for like the average guy who's kind of from out of town. The farmer's never met you before. It's 90% of the time it's going to be a no, right. You know? And in the Sac Valley, where there are quite a few birds that come into that sod, snows, love that green stuff, you know? Guys get into them, but a lot of it is tough to access, right? Right. And there's some good shooting though. For those guys that hunt clubs, I saw today a club that I guess it's like you have to buy a share to get in. You know, they have like 12 members that are allowed in this club, and the cost for the share was $585,000 just to get in. You get a cabin and stuff. I'm like, holy moly, that's expensive money to be.
You better like duck.
Better like duck, yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh man. So all right. So I'm thinking around, you know, where I hunt here in PA, duck numbers. If you see 50 to 100 ducks in a day, like that's a good day to see that many. Okay. You know, honkers, you can get, you know, a few hundred is a good day. And that's about it. What kind of bird count do you see on an average day out there?
Yeah, totally region specific. We're just such a long north-south state, you know, that the birds that you see in the Sac Valley, and just the numbers there are just so different from what you see down here in Southern California, right? And so we'll start with down here. And it just depends on the time of the season. Like early on, pre-opening day, our refuges hold. Yeah, you're talking. I would expect to see about 4,500 to 6,000 birds on a refuge down here in Southern California pre-opening day. But then, like, you get into the season where birds are pressured, and this depends on the weather up north. On a good day, I'd probably see, yeah, you know, like nothing too different from your numbers, but maybe I would say maybe like 200, 300 birds, you know,
Yeah.
a couple high flocks, a couple still local birds mingling around and birds using the roosting areas, and on the refuge. It's down here. It's not a place where you can hang out and just constantly hear, or see birds coming overhead, in Southern California, the bulk of our birds come out of Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay.
That kind of big basin over there. And so a little pro tip is like, you just watch the weather in Salt Lake, and when there's like a 4-day freeze, for example, like instantly you'll just see like sewer, like,
Get out. Start.
Yeah, please get out, because like they're going to be out there, and you can check the little reclaimed water ponds, like at the sanitation district, and there'll be a couple, like 200, 300 widgeons sitting on it, right? And so, but interestingly enough, though, the birds here are pretty, even despite weather, they just kind of come down. I feel like the moon phase and just the timing of the year just pushes birds down, for example.
Right.
Like in November, I can almost guarantee like the 3rd, 4th week in November, like you can see the widgeon counts just bump every single year. Like you'll just see widgeon right around Thanksgiving. Our honkers get here pretty much from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and then there's outflow after that. Our hunting season extends to the end of January, and we even see a reverse migration of birds coming out of Mexico.
Nice.
And so, like the last couple of weeks, which is weird because in other states that they talk about reverse migration, but usually the season's over by the time it happens. But we'll get fully plumed cinnamon teal in the hundreds coming up north, right? And so you just see some big flocks buzzing around. Yeah, any spot with like thick cattails, you can pull up to it and you'll see like a couple red things just swimming in and around the cattails, and those are the cinnamon teal. But heading north, the expectations are totally different. You're talking about seeing birds in the several thousands to 100,000s each time you hunt, right. Where you get out into a spot and the whole day you just can't not hear specks or snow geese flying around, right? And so that's a huge hub to the Pacific Flyway. They winter a whole ton of birds down there, and that if you're a duck hunter and that's what you love to do in the state, and that's like your main deal, like you should live in that area because that's where they're at, And so hence why folks from down here will make that 5-6 hour drive just to hunt every weekend.
Or 700 miles, whatever.
Yeah,
it is.
700 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, I think PA is like 200 miles north to south, because I'm not too far from the northern border of it, and from my house to the West Virginia border is 155 miles. So
sure,
maybe we're probably 180. Well, maybe a little more to New York. Kind of have a little button there, but 700 miles is a long trip.
Oh yeah. And not to make it sound like I talked about how it's tough to get access and the public can be tough, but there is a ton of public land, and we have such diverse ecosystems in this state. I mean, you can hunt a rice field, you can hunt a natural marsh, rivers, estuaries, high mountain alpine lakes. There's flooded timber here. It's a unique state where there's a ton of it's just a diverse area to hunt, And so with that, you see a diverse amount of bird species. I know that we talk about, I see sometimes in the group folks talk about wanting to shoot like pintail or cinnamon teal. I mean, we pretty much see every bird in the state besides black ducks.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happens here, and there's just enough diversity in the habitat. So it's neat. And you can go to those areas where you expect to see a harlequin duck, or you expect to see a canvasback, or expect to find gadwall, and they're there during the season, And so it's a unique place in that sense, and it's a shame that there aren't more public access opportunities up and down the state, because sometimes you'll be driving down the freeway and then you just look over into a lagoon and it's just white with sprig.
Oh, jeez.
It's distracting for a duck hunter because they're like dropping in over the freeway and setting up, and no one really cares except you, because everyone's just driving, to get to the beach or whatever. And there's an old club down in Orange County in the city of Irvine, and that place hunted until I think like the mid '90s, but you could literally hunt that club and be at Disneyland like in 15 minutes.
Oh my god!
And so it's just it's funny how things have changed pretty quickly here. The area that I grew up actually at one point had the densest concentration of dairy farms in the whole country.
Wow.
Believe it or not, like the Chino Valley, and it used to host the whole ton of honkers up until like the early 2000s. I think it peaked out like around 20,000, which is for this kind of smallish valley, you know.
Right.
And folks have traditionally like hunted these dairy farms, like, you know, their alfalfa plots next where they would grow the hay for the cows. The birds would use that stuff. There's some corn down there, and there's a basin down there with like 2 or 3 duck clubs on it. But with urban sprawl and it's just folks not being able to afford living in downtown LA or whatever, you've just slowly seen these dairy farms being pushed out to where today, if you look at a map compared to just 10 years ago, you just see urbanization.
Right.
You know, it's tough. And I'm seeing it up north in the Sacramento Valley too. Areas are slowly being converted to like warehouses or whatnot. The Port of Los Angeles is kind of right off the Interstate 10, which is like a big shipping hub, you know, for truck transportation. And so a lot of these companies have decided to build warehouses along it. And a lot of the ag land is just being converted to warehouses. There was a spot last year. I was honker hunting in the evening, and I, you know, kind of was driving home next to a field that used to be all corn, and it always held, you know, at least 1,000 birds, 2,000 birds on it. And I remember I watched a group of honkers show up, like just migrators show up. You can tell they just dropped them down from high up, you know. Mm-hmm. And historically they had used this area, and they went right, like that lead bird just took them right into that place with all the corn where it used to be. And they were circling, and what was their old feed field is now like a Walmart distribution center.
Oh, geez.
It was kind of a shame. I just watched these, you know, a couple hundred birds circling a Walmart warehouse, and they eventually found somewhere else. But you know, it's sad to see loss of ag. Yeah,
and when you see that and the fight for the public lands, it kind of, you know, puts it more into perspective when it starts hitting you personally. You know, like you said, you used to hunt those fields, and now it's, you know, a concrete jungle that they're trying to land in. So
yeah, and so like if you talk to my fiance, I don't know if she minds, but every time we drive through there, I'm always bickering about it. I'm like, oh, this place used to have. I'm 27. I'm like that, and I'm not that old. So like, I'm already
back in the day. Back in
the day. Yeah.
Well, she can't mind too much if she's going on 7-hour or 700-mile trips hunting with you.
Yeah, she puts up with it. So, but that's just an example of like how things have changed. You know, I think just last year, the last waterfowl dedicated store in this area closed. It had been open for quite a while, and so that place is gone now. And we do have a Bass Pro here, and other than that, in a couple smaller sporting goods shops, you know, things are changing. So we'll see how it looks in 20, 30 years. But
that's crazy.
Luckily, these refuges are conserved in perpetuity, so they'll be here.
Well, you know, California definitely is very diverse, and not just the landscape, but the people as well. And,
sure, yeah.
You know, you're talking about places shutting down. Maybe speak to the whole ammo situation. As far as getting it shipped to you now, and you think that could be why some of these places are closing doors there?
Yeah. So for the folks who don't know, as of this year, 2018, if you are a resident in California, you're no longer able to receive online ammo orders directly to your front door. They passed a couple of laws that prevent that, which is it really just hammered down on outdoorsmen, I feel like, and recreational shooters. But you know, for folks like us, like that hunt a lot of duck and geese and whatnot, it's just a whole lot cheaper to order from Rogers, you know, in the Midwest, and like our smaller stores here where the ammo can be pretty expensive, especially when you're buying in bulk, buying like 4 or 5 cases for the season. And it is a concern that that maybe, little by little it just gets harder to be a hunter here, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it be access or just even something as simple as getting animal to your front door. But I've been encouraged though. I've seen a whole lot of stores open up their FFLs, their firearm handling licenses to receive personal ammo orders.
Okay.
Sometimes with a fee, or sometimes just for the heck of getting someone in the store, and they've been actually really really good about it. And so I think folks are finding a way to get around that issue. They've partnered with their local mom and pop shops, or even Bass Pro over here is kind of doing it, where there's letting you order to the store, even from a competitor, and you can go in and pick it up sometimes for like a holding fee or whatnot. But it's not as easy as just walking up to your front door and picking that case up. But we're finding ways around it.
We're working with you.
Yeah,
and it would be a good business move to price match. I mean, even if it's as big as Bass Pro, but I mean, say, hey, this guy's selling it for this, and here's the website I can send you or whatever. Okay, price match. And they're, instead of making $5 on a holding fee or $10 on a holding fee, you're selling 4 cases of shells. Like, why not?
That's a great idea. Yeah, that and it's just, and there is a benefit. Like if folks are going more local and supporting these smaller shops, that could be good too.
Right.
So to keep that stuff around. So yeah, there's hope. It's tough. I just don't see how, for a lot of sportsmen, we didn't see how creating that law prevented any more, gun violence, right? I mean, but yeah, it's just tough. So
now, is that, I mean, just from living out there, is that like do you think it's a sportsman's issue, like created that? Do you think it's like gang violence? Is it like what?
Oh, like the real driving motivation to...
Yeah, what were the politicians pushing on that?
Yeah, it's... When you look at it, they kind of just... It's almost like they're taking as little steps as they can just to make it tough to be into shooting guns or to be into hunting, And you don't want to believe that, because it's like, well, why? Like, why are you kind of actively doing that? But... like, why do you want to get rid of hunters? Like, we're funding wildlife conservation in the state, and I don't think that's the driving motivation. I think it's just folks who, when you don't grow up doing it, which most of these folks don't, they feel really uncomfortable around firearms. They don't understand they don't understand how a firearm could be a huge responsibility tool to teach someone actually, to respect what they have in their hands and to respect life and other people, and they just kind of look at these possible laws that they can implement and throw in that just to make it tougher, and we haven't had to my knowledge, we haven't had a situation where there's been some mass shooter who all of his ammo was online ordered,
right,
like that. And really what it is, it's an effort to make all transactions in person, right? And so in order to do that, they had to get rid of online sales. And so what they're proposing is that when you go into to a sporting goods store to buy ammo, you have to present your ID. They'll run a background check for you just to buy ammo. And so that's really what it is. They want to run background checks on ammo transactions.
Wow.
And so that's what their motivation was behind that one. And it's just it's hard to imagine if you're not allowed to own a gun, how much harder is it for you to get ammo? If you already can't have the weapon. And so it's tough, and who it really affects is just the sportsman. Like, that's who it's really punished. Like, I don't want to say punishing, but that's who feels the weight of it, right?
Law-abiding citizen. It always seems all the rules that are made hurt the people that aren't doing anything wrong. So
yeah, it's a rough one, and so hopefully, and we already can't, even for upland species, we were not allowed to shoot lead anymore. I think by 2019 or 2020, it's all going to be non-toxic shot, even for dove, even for quail.
Wow.
And so that's also tough because one, it's lead was just a little cheaper to get, lead shells, and also like just the like if you're gonna go out to the sporting goods store and some guy hogs all the steel number 6 or number 8 shot, then you're just kind of out of luck. Are you gonna drive somewhere, or it makes it tough. So
at least the bismuth and whatnot coming out, but I mean that's not cheap per box. So.
No, yeah, and we're seeing it, and I've seen ammo companies kind of cater and respond to it. Like I see a lot more steel shot on the counters now when I go into a store. And the main motivation with that has to do with California condor and how they are saying like a lot of gut piles have lead traces, and some guys are saying that it's potentially detrimental to our condor populations. But then we find a lot of reports that that kind of contradict that. So it's tough for me to make a statement on that one because
keep your work out of it because you're we are talking work, but I can see where opinions could vary there.
There are conflicting opinions within.
Yeah, we've had a few eagles around here die, and a lot of people have put out. And groundhog hunting is like a big thing. Like people will go out and kill a couple hundred groundhogs a year. And my wife's uncle was over actually yesterday and shot a couple groundhogs right in the field right across from my house. So, we shoot them, and my wife texted me today, and what did she say? She said, "Do eagles sound like dolphins?" And I was like, "Yeah, they have their real high pitched screech and stuff." She goes, "Okay, these things are like going crazy out in the field." She's like, "There's 7 eagles out in front of the house right now, and they were eating." So, but a lot of so I mean, people are shooting it with high powered rifles, and all these. A lot of people were saying, if you shoot groundhogs, make sure you push them back down in a hole. Don't let anything eat them. And I'm like, when was the last time you shot a groundhog with a 30-06 or 270 and that bullet lodged in its shoulder or something and didn't go right through it? Like there's no bullet in that. But they're grasping at straws, I think, a little bit on some of it. But
sure.
I think, man, We're an hour and 3 into this already. I told you 30, 45 minutes, and there's so many more questions. So we might have to have you on again. But
of course, yeah.
I think the listeners get a little input into California style, and south and north, and I think I read on your one post where your fiance shot her honkers that last trip that your dog got his first retrieve too. Is that right? Yeah,
we've been training up a young lab. He's going to be a year in a couple weeks here, actually, on the 19th. And it was his first hunt, which it wasn't the way I would have planned it because it was a long trip, cold weather for a SoCal dog, big birds, honkers and specks, just a different environment,
Right.
But man, that guy was stellar on his first shoot, and we got to work on some blind manners, but he's just all taking it in. But in terms of marking birds, retrieving blinds, everything was great. His first bird was a spec, called it with a marvelous hen spoonie. So,
nice. He admits to shooting spoonies. There you go. Yeah. The real man there. No, so that's a great start to your year. Have the future wife out there shooting her birds and the dog getting the first retrieve. So, congrats on that, and I'm sure that you're excited for the rest of the season. And we might have to have you back on here because there's just way too many questions to cover in one episode here. So
there's a ton. Like we have some interesting waterfowling techniques that we employ here that just you'd be surprised to hear about them. But For sure. Yeah. Whenever you guys want, I'm here.
Well, Eric, I appreciate it, and I hope that the listeners enjoyed a little insight into West Coast waterfowling there.
Yeah. No, it was my pleasure.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody learned a little bit about California and hunting out there and what you might expect and kind of how things are done. And thank you to Eric for taking some time and jumping on the show. And, Dan, what do you think? Are you ready to go back to your roots and get all up on some California waterfowl?
Go back to my birthplace. There's California is such take politics, take Hollywood out of it, and California is like an amazing place. There's just such a array of animals and different scenarios that you can hunt in. I think it really is like a little sportsman's paradise if you take out a lot of the negatives that people will talk about. And he brought a lot of that to light. And I just want to say congrats to his fiance for her first spec and Canada that she took on the same day that his dog got his first retrieve. So, a really special hunt they had, 700 some miles one way, and to get all that taken care of. So, he found a lady that is sharing the passion with him, and it's really, really cool.
Man, 700 miles is no joke, but I can't help but think while you were just talking that if I could have played some old school Death Row, California Love, Tupac and Dr. Dre without some copyright infringement situation, I totally would have been jamming that for you right there. Cause I felt you connecting with your roots right there. But, it sounded good in my head.
But you know how I am, I had to, since you haven't listened to it, that he is a surfer and I had to ask about great whites and, he actually went to college in Hawaii, so I asked about sharks there, and I don't know why I always ask about the dangerous stuff. I guess that's always stuff I think about, but it's kind of things that we don't have to deal with, and I'm thankful for that. So good episode all around. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Eric, for taking the time, and it really, Josh, once you take a listen to this, I think there's a lot more questions, and we'll probably have him on again just to rack his mind a little bit on different situations.
Yeah, looking forward to checking it out myself. And I'm sure you got one more thing to cover, but I got nothing else for this week, man. I feel like I've just been completely out of the loop being at Disney over the last week, so I'm just kind of scrambling to get myself back together. But what else you got, man? Yeah,
well, first of all, I'm disappointed because I never got a picture with you eating a turkey leg, even though they're probably like $40 or something like that.
It's because I didn't eat one, but okay.
Did you see him though?
I think I saw one. I didn't. It wasn't prevalent in whatever. I don't know. I think I saw one at was it? I can't remember even what park. Kind of blurred all together. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a crazy trip. But no. So the South Zone of Pennsylvania opened today. I went out with Jacob Britton and Pete Shandrick. They invited me down. I have never heard wood ducks on display like this morning. Like they were so loud, and then hen mallards mixed in. I mean, it was just beautiful to be in a swamp that early. And, this lake it's kind of a long lake, and we chose one end, and there was some other shooting. So by the time they got to us, a lot of birds flew over. We got some shooting in, got some birds, and then as we were picking up, just like every other time, you have a group of 20, 30 mallards circling over one end, then you have a couple woodies buzz right over your head as your gun and everything else is back on shore about 30 yards, and you're picking up decoys and stuff. So never forget your gun when you're picking up.
Are you seeing new birds pushing in with this cold front? Question mark.
I haven't seen them local, which I thought I would, but I drove, an hour and 45 minutes south, and I think those are all local birds too. So I expect more soon. But then I have another buddy that hunted down in the South Zone, and he shot a redhead and a canvasback today. So,
wow.
Yeah. And he asked me, I said, are you getting that mounted? And he's like, well, what do you think? And I said, yeah. He goes, okay, I needed a second opinion. So pretty sure Corey is going to be mounting his first canvasback that he shot on the opener in October in Pennsylvania. So
that's crazy.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, very cool. Yeah, we had our 4-day duck season here in Virginia while I was in Disney, so didn't get to hunt that unfortunately. But I owed the family some time away, so had to pay the piper there. And it was cool. We actually ate, our resort was on a big lake, and we ate outdoors on our last day there. And there was 2 black ducks that were like tame. They weren't tame. They were wild ducks, but they realized that people ate outside here and would feed them. So they got very accustomed to people. So I was literally hand feeding black ducks, waffle fries, my last day in Disney. And my kid loved that, of course. And, yeah, I got a photo that I'll probably post up here next week in the listeners group of some close range finger bang action from those guys that my wife was laughing out loud as I'm grabbing her phone to take the picture. Because literally I was hand feeding these ducks. So
oh my gosh,
yeah, pretty funny stuff. My kid really liked that. But yeah, that was the highlight duck wise for me. But it was like 85, 90 degrees every day when we were there. Landed here today back in Virginia, and I don't think it cracked 60 degrees. It was in the 50s today. So chilly, felt like fall. Really felt good, to be back, and it was nice to feel that.
Well,
got me fired up.
I'll tell you what, it was a big difference because we've been, 70s, 80s, and this morning was like a high of 42 or 43, something like that. And, it rained until shooting time. So, it was a little bit of a shock, going a 30-degree difference and getting rained on. So, wet head a little bit, wet neck, and you get in there and, a little sweat. It was a good little walk, and just different. But man, was it so nice to be back. Yeah. It was so nice. It felt right.
It's awesome. Well, very good. Anything else you want to hit? One more thing before we wrap this show up?
No, man. Thanks to Eric again for taking the time, and it was an eye-opener. A lot of the stuff I didn't know, and I appreciate it all.
Very good. All right, guys. Before we take off, we just want to make sure we thank Dunn Sporting Goods, Native Eyewear, Lucky Duck, 737 Duck and Goose Calls, Gunner Kennels, Big Al Silhouette Decoys, Camp Chef and Black Rifle Coffee Company. Please support the companies that support us. We appreciate it. All right, that does it for episode 104. Thank you to Eric Chan for spending some time with Dan this week while I was on vacation and telling us about how they do it out there on the west side. If you're new to the show, head over to iTunes, check out all the past episodes, and leave us 5-star rating and review. We certainly appreciate that. Dan's giggling in the background. I'm having a hard time keeping it together here, so I think I'm just going to wrap it up on that. Until next week, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.